And I do think that those defensive zone breakout adjustments were massive because at the end of the day, if you can't get the puck out of your end, then you're not going to have a great neutral zone transition game or forecheck or extended offensive zone time game. And we saw that in game one. And to the Bruins' credit, they rectified those ailments for game two, and they were able to draw back with an even. Now, how about the Buffalo side of things? Because I mentioned earlier that there are some question marks for the Sabres. There are. They have a bit of a goalie controversy after game two, and rightfully so. I mean, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen did not have a great game. Even the Geekie goal aside, which of course was an absolute backbreaker. But the Arvidsson goal wasn't great. The first Arvidsson goal was not great to give up either. You have to respect the Bruins outlet, and you have to respect Arvidsson winning that foot race and getting a quick shot off. But that's still a goal that you want your goalie to stop. It's a backhander on the ice. So there are some questions for Buffalo heading into game three. Let's hear what Lindy Ruff had to say after Buffalo wasn't able to capitalize in game two.
Lindy, how did this one get away from you? It seemed like we're at 0-0. Next thing you know, it's 4-0. How did it get away?
I thought they got a couple fortunate bounces. You look at the bounce on the goal where they're flipping it in. The airlifted one that went above us that on the first goal, they got a little bit lucky on too. I thought we started the game good. We had a couple good opportunities. I thought a lot of clutching and grabbing and trying to slow the game down. But overall, you're not going to win every game. They got the experience of playoff win. Now you experience a loss. We've been a good road team. I'm looking forward to going to Boston.
As you should, Lindy. As you should. Boston's a great city. And, you should stop by Regina's Pizza in the North End, get yourself a pie, well done, and thank me later. And same goes for any Sabres fans. If you're going to Boston, you should definitely go to Regina's Pizza. And if not Regina's, because you're short on time, maybe Halftime Pizza, which is right across from the Garden. But yeah, listen, if you're Buffalo, you have to be confident heading into game three because otherwise you've lost before you've taken the ice. You have to be confident in yourself as a team. But I do think that Lindy, for the most part, in that comment, I think he's right. I mean, obviously, the Geekie goal was a fluke goal, so you can chalk that up to a fluke. But I don't totally agree with him on the Arvidsson goal that he's alluding to. As I said, I think that Pekka Luukkonen has to stop that backhander on the ice, no doubt about it. But I feel like Lindy's kind of letting his team off the hook a little bit, chalking that play up to a high lob that they're like, that's hockey, in my opinion. Like, a defenseman using the high lob, a lot of teams do that. Buffalo, I'm sure, does that when they're in trouble. And the fact that Aspro did that and Arvidsson recognized it and outraced both Buffalo defenders to the puck, I mean, that's not lucky. That's hard work. So, maybe I'm taking this comment a little too literal there, and maybe he's referring to the shot that Pekka Luukkonen gave in. But, he did mention the high lob and how that's kind of like, I don't know, that to me, that's a hockey play. And I don't, if I were, a Sabres fan or analyst right now, I'd be saying, I don't want you to let the boys off the hook there. I mean, they got out executed on that scoring play. So, but overall, yeah, I think that Lindy is, correct in the assessment that obviously the Geekie goal was a killer. But it does beg the question, and I'm curious for Sabres fans who may be listening to this video, because I did notice on the last video that many Sabres fans did click to listen, and I welcome all of you. But is there a goalie problem right now for the Sabres heading into game three? Because I personally, looking at Pekka Luukkonen, he just kind of seems maybe I'm wrong, and he's had some good saves. He has had some great saves throughout this series, and he's had multiple breakaway saves too. But just looking at his face, he just seems like he's a deer in headlights. And maybe that's how he always looks. To be fair, I'm not watching Sabres games all year long. But he seems he seems like he's a little bit deer in headlights. And I kind of compare and contrast that to Alex Lyon, who, when he came into the game in relief in game 2, he was in the game for about 10 seconds. And his first whistle, his helmet was, raised above his head, and his face mask was raised so you could see his face on TV. And he was giving it to one of the Bruins players. I think it was Tanner Jeannot. Challenging him to fight, calling him a loser, telling him to F off. Like, I don't know. I just like that intensity. I like that fire and that spirit that I saw out of Alex Lyon, if I'm a Sabres fan. And he had a great year himself, right? By all accounts, it's not necessarily your quintessential starting goalie versus backup goalie situation. They both shared the net, and Lyon played really well throughout much of this season. He may have had some hiccups towards the end, but I might go to Lyon in game 2. I don't know. For Sabres fans listening, let me know what you think about that. Maybe you give Pekka Luukkonen another opportunity here to show himself with a shorter leash. But I don't know. I'm just kind of looking at body language more so than talent, and I wouldn't mind that fire in Alex Lyon. But that's just me. If they do go Pekka Luukkonen, trust me, the Bruins fan base will be all over him, just like the Sabres fans were all over Swayman. And if he flounders under the bright lights in Boston, and maybe he has a short leash, but I'm curious what happens there. I am curious. But some other storylines to come from this game is the temperature in this series really has picked up. There's no doubt about that. You have two old Adams Division rivals that are very passionate fan bases, blue collar hockey cities. Definitely a very entertaining series so far. And I'm sure both fan bases are starting to grow hate and animosity for some players on the opposition. I know for a fact Buffalo Sabres fans are not big fans of Charlie McAvoy right now. And, I can't blame them for it. Obviously, it was a pretty questionable hit. It wasn't the worst low bridge I've ever seen, but it was definitely a bit of a low hit. On the other side of the aisle, Bruins fans, I'm sure, don't love Zach Benson crashing into Jeremy Swayman what feels like every whistle. And, I do think Sabres players have been taking a few more liberties at the whistle on Swayman than Bruins players have been taking liberties on Pekka Luukkonen. Is that fair to say? I mean, I think both fan bases, if you're watching the game objectively, that, I think the Sabres have been going to the Bruins crease a little bit more intentional, but I think it's smart. I think it's smart to try to goad the Bruins into penalties. No doubt about it. I mean, you're obviously going to protect your goaltender, and if the refs are going to, there were some. I think of the three major scrums that happened in game 2, both teams were kind of, they all were guilty as sin. Egging each other on and antagonizing each other and instigating each other, and certainly partaking in some face washings and fisticuffs. I think oftentimes like those scrums should probably go, matching on both sides. But Buffalo came out of all three of those major scrums with a power play. So if you're the Sabres, you're probably looking at it saying, hey, let's keep doing it. Now, the Sabres power play is another question for that team looking forward. They're 0 for 10 in the series. They're 0 for 32 dating back to the regular season since they've last scored a power play goal. And, it is interesting to me because the Sabres, they do have a ton of talent that they can throw out there. You love the fact that Rasmus Dahlin is quarterbacking your power play. You love the fact that you have Tage Thompson and his size and skill and shot and release and creativity, on the half wall and behind the goal. And you like Jason Zucker. He is definitely a good player in the bumper. Josh Norris, good, strong player. There's a lot of talent. So it's surprising that they're struggling the way that they are. But I do wonder if it's mental at this point for Buffalo. And the longer that they go without scoring a power play goal, maybe it gives the Bruins players more incentive to take some liberties with the Sabres in those scrums because, hey, you know what? We'll challenge you to score on the power play finally. And I don't think that's smart. I don't think you want to, flirt with giving teams too many chances, but it's definitely one of the questions for the Sabres heading into game 3. Who's going to be their starting goaltender? If it is Pekka Luukkonen, how long is his leash? Can they get off their power play drought, right? And so these are some questions for Buffalo. Also, they haven't been scoring a ton in the first 2 periods of action. The Bruins, in game 1, it took the Buffalo Sabres, 57 minutes or so to get their first goal of the game. And when they did, they came in plenty, and they got the win. But then in game 2, similar thing. There's 6 minutes to go in the game, and it's 4-0 Boston. And they finally got one, and then they got another one, and they made it interesting. But Buffalo's having a hard time, getting past Swayman early on in these games, in the first 40 minutes of these games. So they have the benefit of their home crowd cheering them on in Buffalo to give them that boost of energy late in games. In games 1 and 2, they're not going to get that same support from the Bruins faithful at TD Garden. So if you're the Sabres, you don't want to rely on these third period comebacks too much. I know they're a great third period team in regular season, but they want to get to their game earlier. They definitely want to find the back of the net earlier. That's obvious. Everybody wants to find the back of the net as soon as possible, but it's been a theme in games 1 and 2. Boston's kept them at bay through the first 45, 50 minutes of both games 1 and game 2. Game 1, it wasn't enough to hold off Buffalo ultimately in 60 minutes, but in game 2 it was. So that's another question. And I have one more question about Buffalo heading into game 3 that I'm curious to get the opinion of Bruins fans and Sabres fans on this alike. But first and foremost, let's go to Nikita Zadorov after the game. And he was talking about the physicality of the series and Sabres players taking some liberties on Swayman, and what the Bruins' responsibility is in those moments.
Important is it when they're crashing that hard every whistle for you guys to be there to clear out the crease like you've been doing?
Yeah, I mean, when I grew up, all my coaches were telling me to protect my goalie. So when somebody slashes my goalie, that's my job to step in. So I don't think they want to keep doing it. They're going to keep getting it. So I mean, that's how it is.
That's how it is, Nikita says. That's how it is. Now, Nikita is one of 2 current Bruins, who are famously former Sabres. Nikita was drafted by Buffalo. It was a long time ago at this point, talking about a decade. But Casey Middlestad also was drafted, high draft pick by Buffalo. And, he spent a lot of time as a Sabre, never made the playoffs with them. But here we are, ironically, they make the playoffs for the first time in 15 years. And Casey's on the other side of it with the Bruins. Now, he's also had some stops along the way. He went to Colorado before Boston. And it's been a couple of years since he was in Buffalo. But Middlestat and Zadorov, 2 former Sabres in this series that Buffalo fans are definitely familiar with. Although it's been a long time since they cheered for Zadorov. I think it was probably 2015 or so. Is that when he was drafted? 2014. But yeah, listen, if you're Buffalo, you have to. I would keep doing it. I would keep sticking Swayman. I would keep going hard to the blue paint after whistles and try to go the Bruins into penalties and agitate them. And as long as you're willing to answer the music, but it's I don't know any team that will stand by and let the opposition take liberties on their goaltender. So it really, until the refs start calling it on Buffalo, then I think they should keep doing it. If Zach Benson goes out there in game 3 and slashes Jeremy Swayman's glove as he's covering up the puck, and the ref calls him for a 2-minute minor slashing, and maybe then, Benson will stop doing it. But until that happens, keep doing it. I mean, it's playoff hockey. It's the game within the game. So that's interesting. And, Lindy Ruff was also asked about the temperature of the series rising.
Expect that temperature in the series to kind of go up a little bit between the McAvoy hit and, the Zadorov thing and things like that maybe they'll try to drag you into more of some of that.
Yeah, well, you heard he said they're bigger and more physical. So, yeah, for sure. I'm a little worried.
Okay, so Lindy obviously is talking tongue in cheek. And, he goes on to let out a bit of a chuckle afterwards too. So I don't want to read too much into that, but I am curious. And as I said earlier, I want to hear from Sabres fans on this too, especially because, you've watched this team religiously all year long and in years past, and you know how these players and these coaches think and whatnot. But from where I sit, and again, I know Lindy was joking there, and I know he was also kind of prompted to answer about the physicality and the temperature rising in the series. But there's a small part of me that I do feel like the Sturm comments from before the series, I do think they're eating at the Sabres. I'm not saying it's going to be in a detrimental way or that it's that big of a deal. But it just feels like they took, that meme, that scene from The Last Dance where Michael Jordan's being interviewed and he says, "I took that personal." That's kind of what it feels like with the Sabres. It was very clearly, minor gamesmanship from Sturm to say what he said. I don't think it was anything crazy, but I do think the Sabres took that personally and kind of as a challenge. And, I think it's been evident that Buffalo has been they've definitely been trying to mix things up just like the Bruins have. They've been trying to prove that, they can go toe to toe with Boston in the physicality department, as they should. It's playoff hockey. But there's been a couple of times now where Lindy's made references to Sturm's comments, and he was asked about them as well. So it's not like he's totally going out of his way to do so. But I don't know. It just I found that comment to be funny, and again, it was tongue in cheek by Lindy. But for Sabres fans that have been watching this team all year, does it feel to you that they're going out of their way to try to prove some point that they are bigger, stronger, tougher than Boston, or at least bigger, stronger, tougher than Marco Sturm may have insinuated that they were? I don't know. I just think that it's something to keep an eye on. You don't want to lose any mental games. If Marco Sturm's comments are still rubbing the Sabres the wrong way, I don't know. To have it as bulletin board material for game 1, sure, but you don't want to let that carry over into games 2, 3, 4, 5. It's just, you got to focus on your game, play your game. And that obviously includes physicality. It's playoff hockey, but I don't know. I found that comment to be funny.